I strongly believe that nowadays a master mariner is, as many mariners may be, a lonely person. Certainly, looking at his situation from various angles, he can be considered the most isolated person on board the vessel. I strongly believe that nowadays a master mariner is, as many mariners may be, a lonely person. Certainly, looking at his situation from various angles, he can be considered the most isolated person on board the vessel. I will present some few points why is this so. 1. Master's authority. As a master of a vessel, being the person in charge or the big boss, is not expected to be liked very much, or at least not by most crew on board. He has to issue orders and ensure that they are being carried out, investigate problems and, at times, issue reprimands or take punitive measures. These actions may make him become disliked or less liked. With a mixed crew nationality, the trouble can be more prominent. Crew from different backgrounds may like to attribute the master's severity or implementation of discipline to the color of the skin or to their nationality, etc. At the same time, though, there is the undeniable fact that when working at sea, like with any other job, one has to be very careful when mixing with subordinates or lower ranks. The idea of calling people by the first names, or even worse using nicknames, after having spent free time together may not really work out when going back to the job. The misunderstanding that the boss is our friend now and we may take advantage is, regrettably, there and cannot be denied. Consequently then, we have to consider establishing levels of seclusion for the different positions on board, with that of the master being the most severe. This may at times be inevitable. To maintain the so-called chain of command, we need to reduce contact with others even if we do not like to, but, as we can guess the grave consequences of not doing so, such as breakdowns in discipline, we have to take preventive action. 2. Cultural differences. On board a vessel with a multinational crew, it is often the case that master is either of entirely different nationality from most of the crew, or is even the only member of his nationality on board. This surely creates barriers apart from those arising from language and communication problems. Among different nationalities that, like Europeans for instance, have close cultures, it may not be very difficult to make relatively good connections, but for others, even if they speak to the same language, due to huge differences in culture and lifestyle, any kind of relationship may seem quite difficult. For the above reason, and also due to the master's position of authority, it is no wonder there is very little ground for the master to establish contact with others on board apart from through the issuing of work orders and communication required for operating the ship. With some people, due to the nature of their language, a simple matter may take hours to discuss. To others, this may seem absurd and offensive. 3. Work patterns and associated pressures. As time goes on, the workloads of the master and of the other staff are being increased, and, with the introduction of newer, reduced manning scales, there is very little time left to deal with loneliness, which may not be physical. The master may have to do a lot of things with other personnel like getting information, issuing orders, etc. But through the master may be seen to have no time and is busy with many things. It does not necessarily mean that he is okay. He quite probably feels terribly lonely inside, as for a human being, social contact is very vital. It is gross mistake for a master to think that his non-work related comments are most welcome, as this is not usually the case. It is his position that renders his comments tolerable by others. On board a ship that has difficulties that fact may be very obvious, it can be very easy to tell when a master has lost command. He will be treated like a decrowned king, with even the stewards resentfully serving him food. While not always so, this is most cases a bitter fact. Most ship personnel regard the master as the person solely responsible for company-related matters and attitudes they dislike, as well as for things that are out of his control, like changes in the weather. If there is any salary delay, punitive action, lack of social services, dirty cargo, approaching typhoon, or even if the cook make a tasteless dinner, that is all the captain's fault and it will automatically be included in discussion at any gatherings or during any other occasions of contact apart from the purely rigid issuing of job orders. There is another valid point that the competency level among seafarers is continuing to diminish day by day. This is increasing the attention the master has to pay, as well as tensions arising from extra pressure. A master these days would prefer just to have a guy who knows his job relatively well rather than one with whom to be friendly and socialize. 4. Calling ports conditions. In many ship trades today, the ports are in places farthest from any society, requiring you to drive miles if the authorities allow you out of the port at all. For the master, it may be hardly possible to leave the ship anyway, as he needs to be present when the quarantine officer, port state control inspector, security officer and many other individuals come on board, otherwise his ship may have many problems. A vigilant master would never bargain a few hasty, anxious hours in the center of cosmopolitan port city against detention of his vessel and the consequent growls of the owner. We may say that even in port, the master is very lonely, as the people who visit the ship just come aboard and do the business, after which he remains confined to the ship. ISPS restrictions are also a worsening factor in this respect. In olden times, when the master was usually the owner of the ship or a person from a different class or group of people and the others were on the boat to serve and satisfy his demands, the matter of being alone or not would not have been questioned or might not have been considered as important as it is today. In the past 20 years, though, the shipping business and activities related to it have changed drastically, and one can say we now have a problem. 15 or 20 years ago, the port stays were much longer, the number of people on board was 1.5 times greater, and the atmosphere on board was quite friendly and crew had time for each other. But now the manning is short, and officers are quickly graduated, life and work is measured in milliseconds, ports operate with pre-planned schedules for the next year, and there are so many thorns in our sides as we try to achieve faster and faster operations. The owners may cut the manning scales to a bare minimum to bring down expenses, but the cost of mistakes resulting from fatigue or mental disturbances, one of them loneliness caused by all elements described above, may be much more expensive. We should bear in mind that the master is the person on board ship who is the most responsible, open to questioning, and ultimately answerable, and who has all the arrows pointing in his direction. He should not be left to deal with all these troubles alone. The company must give him the logistics support and manpower to run the ship safely. And last but not the least, we must not forget that the master is also human and has the same human needs as anyone else.